In the small town where I grew up, there is a high school that had a dark and chilling history. The rumors had circulated for years, but it wasn't until I became a student there that I truly understood the eerie presence that lingered within those halls. Legend had it that decades ago, a tragic incident occurred in the school. A student named Emily had fallen victim to relentless bullying, leading her to take her own life in the very halls that we walked. It was said that her spirit still haunted the premises, seeking revenge on those who had tormented her. At first, I dismissed these tales as mere ghost stories, meant to scare the incoming freshmen. But as time went on, strange occurrences began to unfold, and I couldn't deny the unsettling atmosphere that enveloped the school. It started with whispers in the hallways, faint voices that echoed when the halls were empty. Teachers dismissed it as nothing more than the building's old pipes, but we all knew better. It was Emily, lingering in the shadows, desperate to be heard. Then came the inexplicable footsteps. Footsteps that would follow you as you made your way to the bathroom or the library. You would turn around expecting to see a classmate or a teacher, but there was no one there. It was Emily, watching our every move. But the most chilling encounters happened in the auditorium. Students and staff would hear the soft sound of piano keys being played when nobody was near the instrument. The stage curtains would sway as if caught in a breeze, even when the windows were closed tight. And on rare occasions when the auditorium was empty, you could hear Emily's haunting voice, singing a melancholic melody that sent shivers down your spine. One night, a group of friends and I decided to investigate further. Armed with flashlights and a sense of trepidation, we ventured into the school after hours. The hallways were dimly lit and the silence was deafening. As we made our way towards the auditorium, a cold breeze swept through the corridor, sending a chill down our spines. We traded nervous glances, but we were determined to uncover the truth. Entering the auditorium, we were greeted by an ethereal scene. The stage was aglow with an otherworldly light, and the sound of the piano resonated through the room. We watched in awe as the keys moved by themselves, playing a haunting melody that echoed through the empty seats. Suddenly a figure appeared on the stage, a young girl with long, flowing hair. It was Emily. Her eyes were filled with sadness and her voice pierced the air as she sang a heart-wrenching song of despair and longing. We stood frozen, captivated by her presence, but as the song had reached its crescendo, Emily's gaze shifted towards us, and a look of anger twisted her features. The air grew heavy and a sense of dread washed over us. We knew that we had trespassed into her realm and she wanted us all gone. With a burst of courage, we turned and ran, not daring to look back. The sound of Emily's furious screams echoed through the hallways as we made our escape. From that day on, the stories of Emily's ghostly presence continued to circulate. Students and staff alike could feel her haunting presence, a reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within those walls. The high school became a place of both fear and fascination, a testament to the enduring power of the supernatural. Whether you believed in ghosts or not, there was no denying the chilling reality of our encounters with Emily. The legend had become our own personal nightmare, forever etched in our memories. The forest has always held a certain allure for me. Its beauty and mystery beckoned me to explore its depths, and I often found solace in its tranquil embrace. But one fateful day, my love for the woods turned into a terrifying ordeal that would forever change my perception of nature. I joined a Facebook group where people would post ads for butchering equipment. I had this old meat slicer that was no longer in use. As I was getting ready for work one morning, I got a message. It was around 6:20, but that didn't seem to bother this very passionate and potential buyer. He asked a few questions about the meat slicer and seemed a bit frantic, like his life depended on that machine. He requested a video call a few times to make sure that the machine was working properly, which I rejected as I was getting ready for work. And then he found another ad that I had posted, an old typewriter. Apparently he was interested in that too. Asked me about the price, if it was functional, etc. Standard questions. We had texted for around 20 minutes when he asked if he could call me, to seal the deal. I gave him my number, to which he said, "I can't call you, we're not on the same network. Can I call you on Facebook Messenger instead?" So we did. I picked up and asked if he could hear me. No response. I looked at the screen and well, let's just say, I find it impressive that somebody managed to participate in a semi-normal 20-minute conversation about buying butchering equipment and a typewriter at 6:40 in the morning while doing you-know-what. First off, I'm 19 and I'm a guy, so I've never been in such a weird and uncomfortable situation like this before. I don't know, I thought this encounter was completely weird and inappropriate. My neighbor lives with his wife next door and he's always outside chatting with the other neighbors. Very popular in the neighborhood and he gives everybody free beer and cuts people's grass for free, so I figured he's a pretty nice guy. Yesterday his wife wasn't there and he asked me if I could help him connect his VCR to a smart TV. I figured why not. As soon as I stepped inside, I immediately noticed that he was really drunk. He kept hugging me and telling me that I have a nice body, calling me handsome and touching my chest, face, and arms in a nonchalant way, playing it off as him being friendly. It made me uncomfortable, but I just figured he was senile or something. He kept trying to make conversation and he was telling me that we should go to the movies sometime and be friends, telling me about the projects around the house that he wanted me to do for money and just other really awkward stuff. As I was threading the HDMI cable through the back of the TV stand, I told him that the cable might not be long enough and he said under his breath, "Just like that hard piece of yours." I was so caught off guard that I just pretended that I didn't hear him. I had been to this guy's house before and chatted with him, but he's never once acted like this towards me, so I was kind of in shock. His wife was always there though, so I guess that might be why he never tried anything until now. While I was helping him, I noticed that he had his hand in his pocket and he kept aggressively adjusting his crotch. At that point, I just wanted to get the heck out of there, but he pretty much held me hostage and started bombarding me with strange personal questions, and he was trying to get me to drink. Just weird stuff about my personal habits, what I like to watch, if I liked men and had I ever had it with a guy, am I a virgin, and he even asked me if I had ever had a piece in my mouth, and presented me with the offer. I refused to answer all of his questions and promptly got the heck out of there after telling him off. I'm just completely shocked because this dude is the most popular guy in the neighborhood with a wife and kids. I just wonder if his wife knows about this or if he's behaved like this around other people besides me.
I am and have always been a very small girl, standing at 4'11", full grown now at 27. And I've always been able to pass as being much younger than I am, especially if I'm not wearing any makeup. When I was a small child, about 7 or 8, my father bought a little cabin in a town in Texas called Livingston, in an area of Livingston called Alaska. I specify because of the second part of the story. Anyone with kids needs to be wary of the area. The cabin was really nothing remarkable at only 600 square feet. It was really just one giant room, a teeny kitchen the size of a normal bathroom, and a bathroom the size of a large closet, and a porch out front. The whole property consisted of 2 lots, so there was plenty of space, but the cabin itself was dinky. This whole area was in a strange mix between backwoods and suburbia. It was a true neighborhood, but not the prim and neatly kept neighborhoods I was used to in suburbia Houston. Despite this, it became a very fond place for me, and some of my greatest memories in life are at that cabin. including my evacuation story from Houston during Hurricane Rita. That is a story for another day. Anyways, around 11 to 12 years old, my father bought me a four-wheeler, and the little lake town suddenly became a lot bigger. I didn't go super far, but I definitely ended up going further than I had ever gone before. And it was quite common to see me zipping up and down the roads with a pile of neighborhood kids on the back of the four-wheeler when we would go up to the lake house on weekend visits. This was around 2001 to 2002, so cell phones were a thing, but it was still common for people not to have them. Usually I had a beeper that I carried around, but with no phones at the lake house, my father gave me a walkie-talkie with a very long reach instead. Looking back on it now from a world of cell phones, this seemed like a bad idea. This was a small town and we had spent so much time here that it felt safe. So one of these weekends, I was buzzing around my neighborhood like I usually did, and I stopped at this peninsula that overlooked the lake. This was a set of docks that us kids always came to when we wanted to swim, despite the very real threat of giant alligators. But being stupid kids, we really didn't worry about that. And I was overlooking the lake when my walkie-talkie buzzed to life. Naturally thinking it was my parents trying to reach me, I answered quickly. I couldn't quite make out what they said at first, so I tried confirming that it was my dad. At this point in the neighborhood was a little ways away from the cabin, but I had reached my parents from this point before, so despite the fact I could not quite recognize the voice, I assumed it was my dad. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was off enough that I remember being slightly annoyed. Garbled questions that I had answered, but no answers that would have hinted at who I was or where I was. Eventually, the conversation started to drift in a way that I knew something was off, but I was not alarmed just yet, as my dad was notorious for pulling pranks on me and goofing around. I kept talking stupidly. Alarm bells weren't going off yet. Finally though, the guy on the other end of the walkie-talkie makes a comment. I cannot for the life of me remember what he said exactly, but it was enough to make me doubt that it was my father. This is when things took an extremely creepy turn. Bear in mind, I'd been talking to this guy pretending to be my father for a good 15 minutes, sitting on my four-wheeler on this peninsula. I can see you. You should come take a ride in my boat, he said. My father had a boat, but this was so out of character that it made me realize that it wasn't my father. Dad, you're not Dad, are you? What are you talking about? He said. If you can see me. I started feeling a bit peeved that this guy had been messing with me. What am I wearing? He paused for a second before the walkie crackled to life, and he said very clearly, You're wearing an orange shirt. You have red hair and you're sitting on a red four-wheeler right by the swim docks. Why don't you come for a ride in my boat? At this point, my eyes widened and my blood ran cold. This entire time, some strange guy that I didn't know had been watching me from God knows where. It took me maybe 10 seconds to look around wildly and then kick the four-wheeler up and race out of there so fast that the wheels had a hard time catching the ground. I remember the wheels spun out against the gravel beneath them, and when the four-wheeler finally started moving, little me had a hard time holding on. I floored it the entire way home, stopped in the middle of the yard and burst into the house. Obviously, the first thing I did was ask my parents if they had contacted me, which they had not and hadn't for hours. I was in such a panic that there is no way my dad wouldn't have convinced had it been him. He was a practical joker, but he knew when the fun was over. I hate to think what might have happened had I continued sticking around the area, or if I hadn't figured out that it wasn't my dad pulling my leg. Nothing came of this incident though, and my childhood up there resumed as normal. Eventually, the weekend visit stopped, but the story doesn't end there. During my parents' divorce, I moved to live at the lake house permanently with my father, or at least until we could find something better. This was the only place that we could go when he left my mother, which is a long story in and of itself, but I won't get into that. My father had recently suffered from health issues, so I took a job at a nearby gas station, tobacco barn, to pay the bills and let him recuperate. Thankfully, the lake house had no bills save for electricity, water, and internet, so my small salary was enough to keep us going. I only worked there for 3 months, but those 3 months were by far the creepiest that I'd ever experienced. Within the first month, a rather tall and obese man became infatuated with me, and he couldn't have been creepier. He had short crew-cut hair and a slightly unkempt beard and mustache combo. The first time that we ran into each other, he stared at me with these wide, crazy eyes, got his gas, and just stood there for 2 or 3 solid minutes, just staring. When I asked him if I could help him, he said nothing. Now, the part of the tobacco barn I worked in was strictly the gas side, and I was pretty much in a glass box with an opening to take people's money and give them their cigarettes, which I could not have been more thankful for. Several times this man came to visit, and he would leave to pump gas after staring at me awkwardly. About the 4th or 5th time, after I thought that he had left, I heard a knock on the other side of the barn on the glass. And there he was, face pressed against the glass, staring at me with this wide, manic grin, and waving at me with his fingers. It was enough to send me running for my manager when he left, demanding to go on break before I peed myself. The last time that I saw him, I will never forget though. It has been etched into my mind so deeply that I doubt bleach could scrub it away. He arrives as he usually did and orders his gas. This time, however, he reached through the hole in the glass and grabbed my hand before I could put the cash away in the cash register. It wasn't a violent grab, but it was firm enough to keep me from pulling away. Being a very sheltered 18-year-old, I froze in place. "I love you," he said, refusing to let go of my hand. I simply stared at him, unnerved and alarm bells ringing in my head. "Say it." "What?" I responded. "Say you love me." Naturally, I just wanted this guy to go away. And being so freaking scared out of my mind at this point of him, I stammered and I said it out of impulse. Maybe he would let me go and go away. "I love you," I said uneasily. "Call me if you need anything." "What's my number?" he asked again. This threw me off completely, and the look on my face probably gave away my confusion, because he repeated himself, despite my stammering that I did not know. Finally, he said something that made my blood run cold. I felt like I was going to throw up. "It's 911. He winked. This guy was the sheriff deputy, the person that I would have to call if I got into any sort of trouble in town. The person that I would have to call if I had a medical emergency, or if someone tried to rob me. And he wouldn't let go of my hand. I just nodded, trying to keep myself from shaking bad enough for him to feel it. He had never pulled up in a police car or anything, but when I talked to my manager, she confirmed what he said as being true. Once he did let go of me and went on his way, I retreated to the back and demanded to be relieved from the gas station area. I didn't care. I did not want to see that guy ever again. Thankfully, we moved soon after, so I never had to. But I will never forget the leering grin that man gave me every single time he purchased gasoline. You would think moving away would be the end of the story, but no. It got even worse when I went to college, and you wouldn't think that would be the case considering I was in Galveston. I needed to go to my counselor to discuss a few things, and this usually involved about 30 minutes of chit-chat, as me and my counselor had become close while I was attending school. During one of these chats, which my father had attended due to him attending school in the same classes as it was in an effort to finally get his degree, I mentioned Onalaska, Texas, and how we had owned a lake house up there. Initially, the happy expression left my counselor's face. She informed me that she had been a social worker in that area for quite a few years. And suddenly my childhood playground took an extremely dark turn, and the sheriff at the gas station became a nightmare. Apparently that area was notorious for kidnappings and other horrible incidents. Whole neighborhoods, including police officers, were in on it, and it was common for people trying to out the incidents to either going missing or to be completely thrown out of the community through intimidation tactics. She proceeded to tell me of several cases she had worked on, careful to leave out confidential details of course, including incidents of entire families being in on the whole mess. When I told her about the sheriff that I had encountered, she kind of paled and wouldn't tell me anymore, except that she wasn't surprised. The conversation went on for over an hour and a half, but it was enough to make me never want to return to the small town that I had called my childhood summer home, and vowed to never ever bring any children I might have in the future there. So did the guy that intercepted my walkie-talkie signal and tried to lure me onto his boat. And to the creepy sheriff, let's never meet again. For the love of God, please.